The morning air in Long Beach, California, carried a damp chill that seeped through the window frames of Leo's small apartment. It was a persistent grayness that mirrored the landscape of his own recent past. 3 years in remission, yet the phantom aches of chemotherapy still visited him on mornings like this. The world outside moved on with a relentless hum, a rhythm he struggled to rejoin, feeling like a musician playing a half beat behind the orchestra. Life was a song he had forgotten the words to. His guitar, an old scarred acoustic, was his only confidant in the quiet hours. It was a relic from before the diagnosis, a time of careless laughter and dreams of crowded venues. Now, its wood grain felt like a roadmap of his own faded scars, each notch and scratch a memory. He didn't play for an audience anymore. He played to fill the suffocating silence that cancer had left in its wake, an emptiness that his own voice often felt too weak to challenge. The melody arrived first, a simple, haunting 4-chord progression that seemed to rise from the very floorboards. It was the sound of a long, sleepless night, of watching the clock tick towards another dawn you weren't sure you'd see. It was melancholic, but held a stubborn flicker of hope, a single, resilient note that refused to be extinguished. This melody became his private language, a way to speak of the unspeakable without uttering a single word. Then came the lyrics, scrawled in a beat-up notebook with a trembling hand. They weren't poetic or polished. They were raw, brutal, and painfully honest. He wrote about the sterile smell of hospital corridors, the metallic taste of medicine, and the hollow look in his mother's eyes. He wrote of the anger, the fear, and the profound, crushing loneliness of fighting a battle inside your own body, a war invisible to the outside world. The song, which he tentatively titled Faded Scars, was a testament to his survival, but it felt more like a ghost. It haunted the corners of his small apartment, a powerful, emotional entity he had created, but was now terrified of. To sing it aloud felt like reopening a wound, a deliberate act of vulnerability he wasn't sure he could endure. It was his truth, but it was a truth he kept locked away, hidden between the pages of his notebook. His days were a monotonous loop of part-time work at a local bookstore, quiet evenings, and the ever-present shadow of his illness. He saw his friends move on with their careers, their relationships, their lives, while he felt anchored to a past he desperately wanted to escape. The future felt like a foreign country for which he had no visa, a place where everyone else seemed to belong, and he was just a visitor with an expired passport. One rain-swept Tuesday afternoon, sitting on the edge of his bed, he finally played Faded Scars all the way through, from the first hesitant chord to the final fading note. The act left him breathless, tears streaming down his face, not of sadness, but of release. For the first time, the oppressive silence in the room was filled not with emptiness, but with the sound of his own resilience, his own story. The song was more than just music. It was proof. It was proof that he had weathered the storm, that he had fought the war, and against all odds was still standing. The lyrics were his testimony, the melody his heartbeat, and the finished piece was a declaration that even though he was scarred, he was not broken. The music had given him a voice when he thought he had lost it forever. His best friend, Maya, was the only other person who knew about the song. She had been his rock through the entire ordeal, the one person who never flinched from the harsh realities of his illness. When he finally gathered the courage to play it for her, she simply sat and wept, her tears a mirror of his own. "Leo," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The world needs to hear this. This song. It's a lifeline." He dismissed her pleas initially, the fear of judgment and pity far outweighing any desire for recognition. Who was he? Just another kid with a guitar and a sad story. The world was full of them. Why would his voice matter? The thought of putting his most vulnerable self on display for strangers was paralyzing. A high-wire act he was certain he would fail. But Maya was persistent, her belief in him unwavering. She argued that his story wasn't just his own. It was the story of millions who had faced similar battles in silence. His song wasn't a cry for pity. It was an anthem of strength. "Think about the people you could reach, Leo," she insisted. "The people who feel as alone as you did. This could be the light they're searching for. A seed of an idea, terrifying and exhilarating, began to take root in his mind. He thought of his childhood in Long Beach, cruising down the streets with his dad, the windows down, listening to the smooth, laid-back rhymes of Snoop Dogg. Snoop was the epitome of California cool, a symbol of longevity and resilience in a ruthless industry. An audacious, impossible thought sparked. What if he could hear it? What if the ultimate Long Beach legend could hear a song from a kid just a few miles away? The decision was made in a moment of reckless bravery, fueled by Maya's unshakable faith and a desperate need to do something other than fade back into the background of his own life. The plan was as simple as it was audacious. Leo would record a raw, one-take video of himself performing Faded Scars and post it online. He wouldn't use fancy equipment, just his phone propped up on a stack of books in his dimly lit living room. The camera's red light felt like a judgmental eye, magnifying his insecurities. His hands trembled as he positioned his fingers on the fretboard, his voice cracking on the first few words. The performance was far from perfect. A car horn blared outside, his voice wavered with emotion, and a tear escaped and rolled down his cheek mid-verse. But its imperfection was its power. It was real, unvarnished, and achingly human. Before uploading, Maya devised the second part of their strategy. They wouldn't just send it into the void, they would give it a target. She created a hashtag, simple and direct, jarred Leo to Snoop. "We're putting it out there in the universe," she said, her fingers flying across her phone's keyboard. "We're sending a digital prayer to the Dogg Father himself." Leo watched, a knot of anxiety and hope tightening in his stomach. The video went live on a Wednesday night. For the first few hours, the only views were from Leo, Maya, and his mom. The silence of the digital world felt even more profound than the silence in his apartment. He refreshed the page obsessively, his heart sinking with each static number. The grand, life-changing moment he had nervously anticipated had fizzled into a digital whisper, lost in the hurricane of online content. But Maya was a relentless force of nature. She shared the video with every person she knew, messaging local music bloggers, community groups, and cancer support forums. She wrote impassioned captions, telling Leo's story with a conviction that he himself lacked. She was his general, marshalling a small but dedicated army to fight for his voice to be heard against the overwhelming noise of the internet. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something began to shift. A comment appeared from a stranger in Ohio, a mother whose son was undergoing treatment. "Thank you for this," she wrote. "We feel so seen." Then another, from a survivor in Australia. "This is the song I didn't know I needed to hear." Each new comment, each share, was a small spark in the darkness, building a quiet but powerful fire. The hashtag, #YourLeoToSnoop, began to catch on. It started as a trickle, then a steady stream. People who had never met Leo were tagging Snoop Dogg's official accounts, moved by the raw authenticity of the video. They shared their own stories of loss and survival in the comments, transforming a simple post into a digital vigil, a communal space for shared grief and resilience. Leo watched the unfolding phenomenon with a sense of disbelief. These were not fans of a musician. They were people connecting with a feeling. They heard the tremble in his voice and recognized their own fear. They saw the tear on his cheek and felt their own sorrow. The song had become a vessel for their collective experiences, a shared language for a pain that often has no words. Still, the idea of Snoop Dogg himself ever seeing it felt like a distant dream. He was a global icon, a titan of the industry, his life a whirlwind of tours, business ventures, and celebrity appearances. His social media was likely a fortress, managed by a team of professionals who filtered out the endless noise of requests and pleas from the public. Leo's video was just one more message in a bottle, cast into an infinite ocean. The turning point came from an unexpected place. A well-known oncologist from UCLA, who had a significant following on Twitter for his work in patient advocacy, stumbled upon the video. He was so moved by its raw honesty that he shared it with his network, writing, "This is the sound of survivorship, the raw, unfiltered truth. Let's get this to our Snoop Dogg and show the world the power of art as medicine." That tweet acted as a powerful accelerant. It lent a new layer of credibility and urgency to the campaign. News outlets, always hungry for an uplifting human interest story, began to take notice. Local news blogs in Los Angeles wrote short pieces about the Long Beach cancer survivor's musical plea to Snoop Dogg. Digital whisper had become a roar. Leo's phone buzzed incessantly, the screen a constant cascade of notifications. He felt a dizzying mix of terror and elation. He had spent years trying to be invisible, to hide the scars that cancer had left on him. Now, that very vulnerability was being broadcast to the world, his deepest pain becoming his public identity. The prayer they had sent into the digital ether was being answered, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for the God to reply. This is the moment everything changes. An incredible viral movement is born from a place of pure honesty. If you're feeling the power of this story, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. Let us know in the comments what song has gotten you through a tough time. The connection between Leo and the world was made, but the most important connection was yet to come. Inside the plush leather interior of a custom Maybach, cruising through the sun-drenched streets of Los Angeles, Snoop Dogg was scrolling through his phone. His world was a curated feed of business deals, music collaborations, and memes. His day was a tightly packed schedule, a stark contrast to the laid-back persona he projected. His team usually filtered his mentions, presenting him only with what was deemed essential. But this time, something slipped through the cracks. His nephew, a young, aspiring music producer, sent him a direct link with a simple message. "Unc, you gotta see this, from the LBC." Intrigued by the personal recommendation, Snoop tapped the link. The screen filled with the image of a pale, nervous young man, his face framed by the dim light of an apartment that looked like 1,000 others Snoop had seen in his youth. He watched. He didn't just listen. He watched Leo's hands tremble on the guitar. He saw the flicker of pain and resilience in the young man's eyes. He heard the slight crack in his voice, not as a sign of weakness, but as a mark of authenticity. In a world of auto-tuned perfection and manufactured emotion, Leo's performance was a gut punch of pure, undiluted reality. The sound was rough, the video grainy, but the feeling was undeniable. Snoop, the master of cool, the unflappable icon, felt a genuine stir of emotion. The song wasn't his genre, but the story was universal. It was a story of survival, of fighting your way out of a dark place. He had built his entire career on telling his own stories of survival, of navigating the treacherous streets of Long Beach, and the even more treacherous landscape of the music industry. He recognized the same fight in Leo's eyes. He replayed the video, this time closing his eyes to listen. He heard the city in the background, the same sounds that had been the soundtrack to his own life. He heard the kid's heart in every single lyric. This wasn't a clout-chasing gimmick. This was a soul crying out, using the only language it had left. He felt a sense of paternal pride and a deep artistic respect. He called his manager, a no-nonsense man named Frank. "You see this kid? This Leo to Snoop thing?" Snoop's voice was calm, but Frank could detect the underlying seriousness. "Yeah, it's blowing up a bit. We were just prepping a statement," Frank replied, assuming it was a standard request for a handout or a shout-out. "Nah," Snoop said, cutting him off. "Forget the statement. Find the kid. Get me his number. I want to talk to him." Call reached Leo on a Friday afternoon while he was shelving books at work. The number was blocked and he almost ignored it, assuming it was another spam call. But some instinct made him answer. "Hello?" he said, his voice hesitant. "Is this Leo?" A calm, professional voice on the other end asked. "Yes," Leo replied, his heart beginning to pound. "Please hold for Snoop Dogg." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Leo stumbled into the back storeroom, his legs feeling like jelly, and sank onto a stack of cardboard boxes. He could hear the faint sound of music and chatter on the other end of the line before a voice so iconic and unmistakable it felt like it was being beamed in from another dimension, spoke. "Yo, what up, nephew? I heard you was looking for me." Leo couldn't form words. He just sat there, clutching his phone, his mind a complete blank. Snoop chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Breathe, young blood. I got your message. That song got a whole lot of heart. You put your soul in that and I respect that. That's real LBC right there." Leo finally managed to stammer a Thank you. His voice barely a whisper. Snoop didn't waste time. He wasn't interested in platitudes. He was interested in the art. Listen to me, he said, his tone shifting from casual to focused. The world heard your pain. Now, they gotta hear it right. I got a studio in Inglewood. I want you to come down. Let's take what's in that room of yours and put it on a proper track. Let's make it echo, you feel me? The offer was so far beyond anything Leo had ever dared to dream that it felt unreal. He thought he might be hallucinating, a side effect of the overwhelming stress and excitement of the past few days. He agreed, his voice still shaky, and they arranged the details. After the call ended, he sat in the storeroom for a full 10 minutes, staring at the wall, the phone still pressed to his ear. When Maya found him, he was pale and trembling. "What happened?" she asked, her eyes wide with concern. Leo looked up, at her a slow-spreading smile finally breaking through his shock. "Snoop Dogg," he said, the words tasting foreign and magical. "He wants me to go to his studio. He wants to produce my song." The news spread through his small circle like wildfire. His mom cried tears of joy, his co-workers at the bookstore cheered, and Maya looked like a proud parent whose child had just won an Olympic gold medal. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a gray, nebulous fog. It felt like a song waiting to be written, and the world's most unlikely producer was about to help him find the right key. The address led Leo and Maya to a nondescript building in a quiet industrial part of Inglewood. There was no giant sign, no flashing lights, just a heavy, soundproof door and a small security camera. The contrast between the building's anonymous exterior and the legendary status of its owner was stark. It was a place built for work, not for show, a sanctuary dedicated to the craft of music. Snoop Dogg was waiting for them inside. He wasn't flanked by an entourage or dripping in jewels. He was dressed in a comfortable tracksuit, his demeanor calm and welcoming. He greeted Leo with a warm handshake and a nod of respect. "Welcome to the church," he said with a slight smile, gesturing to the state-of-the-art recording studio. "This is where we make the spirit move." The room was a cathedral of sound, with a mixing board that looked like the cockpit of a spaceship, and walls lined with platinum records that traced the history of modern music. Leo, who had recorded his viral hit on a phone propped on books, felt a wave of imposter syndrome wash over him. This was a world he didn't belong in, a league so far above his own he couldn't even see it. Snoop seemed to sense his unease. He didn't rush him to the microphone. Instead, he sat him down on a leather couch and just talked to him. He asked about his fight, about his family, about the moment he wrote the song. He listened with an intensity, an empathy that disarmed Leo completely. He wasn't just a celebrity. He was a master communicator, a man who understood the power of making someone feel seen and heard. "Your song is the truth," Snoop said, leaning forward. "My job ain't to change it. My job is to build a house around it, a place where it can live and be heard properly. All that pain, all that hope, we just gotta give it the right speakers." He spoke about music with a reverence that resonated deeply with Leo, bridging the gap between their vastly different lives. They spent the first hour just listening to Leo play the song live on his acoustic guitar in the middle of the grand studio. Snoop sat silently, eyes closed, absorbing every nuance. When Leo finished, the silence in the room was thick with respect. "The heart is there," Snoop said, nodding slowly. "The bones are strong. But it's lonely. It sounds like one man's fight." He paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. "This song ain't just for you, nephew. It's for everyone who's been through the fire. It needs another voice. A voice that understands the quiet parts, the whispers. A voice that sounds like hope in the dark." Leo looked at him, confused. He thought this was his song, his story. Snoop picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts, a list that was likely a who's who of the music industry. "I'm thinking of someone who can bring a different kind of light to this," he mused, almost to himself. "Someone who ain't afraid of the shadows." He stopped on a name, and a slow grin spread across his face. "Yeah, that's the one." He made a call, and after a brief, quiet conversation, he looked up at Leo. "I sent the video link to a friend of mine. I think she's gonna get what you're doing." He didn't say the name. letting the suspense hang in the air. Leo's mind raced with possibilities, but none of them could have prepared him for what was to come. An hour later, as they were experimenting with a subtle bass line, the studio door opened. In walked Billie Eilish, her expression thoughtful and serious. She was dressed in her signature oversized style, but her presence was quiet and unassuming. She gave a small wave to Snoop and then turned her attention to Leo, her piercing blue eyes holding a look of profound empathy. Leo felt the air leave his lungs. Billie Eilish, the voice of a generation, a global superstar whose music explored the depths of human emotion, was standing 10 feet away from him. She had listened to his song. She had come. He felt Maya, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, grab his arm, her own shock mirroring his. Billie didn't speak at first. She walked over to Leo, her movements deliberate. "I heard your song," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "My brother and I listened to it this morning. It made me cry. It's everything." She looked at him, not as a fan or a curiosity, but as a fellow artist, a peer. "Snoop was right," she continued, turning to the iconic rapper. "It's an incredible song, and I would be honored to be a part of it." The world had turned upside down. The quiet, lonely song born from the silent suffering in his Long Beach apartment was about to become a duet. A duet between a cancer survivor, a hip-hop legend, and the most influential pop artist on the planet. The echo in his room was about to become a symphony, and its sound would be bigger and more beautiful than he had ever imagined. The recording session was unlike anything Leo could have imagined. There was no pressure, no corporate oversight, just 3 artists and an engineer united by a single purpose. The atmosphere in the studio was one of sacred creativity. Snoop took on the role of a wise, grounding producer, while Billie became Leo's artistic confidant, her intuitive understanding of his music bridging the gap between his raw talent and the polished studio environment. They started from scratch, with just Leo and his guitar. Billie pulled up a chair close to him, not as a superstar, but as a collaborator. She asked him to explain the meaning behind each line, the emotion he felt when he wrote it. She listened with an almost painful intensity, absorbing the story until it became a part of her too. She was mapping the emotional terrain of the song before singing a single note. Her approach was gentle and respectful. When she first added her voice, it wasn't a harmony, but a soft, ethereal echo of his own, like a whisper of support. She found the spaces between his words, filling them with breathy, melancholic counter-melodies that amplified the song's sense of vulnerability. It was as if her voice was the ghost of the pain he was singing about, giving it form and texture. Snoop guided the session with a masterful, minimalist touch. He wasn't trying to turn faded scars into a hip-hop track or a pop hit. He was simply building a richer sonic world for the story to live in. He suggested a subtle, deep sub-bass that felt more like a heartbeat than an instrument, and a sparse, haunting piano line that trickled through the chorus like rain on a window pane. Watching the 2 icons work was a masterclass in creativity for Leo. Billie would hum a melody, and her brother Phineas, who had joined them via video call, would translate it into a specific synth pad or vocal effect. Snoop would listen, nod, and say something like, "Pull that back a little. Let the kid's guitar breathe." They were sculpting, with sound, each decision made in service of the song's emotional core. The most magical moment came when they recorded the final chorus. Leo sang the lead, his voice stronger and more confident than ever before. Billie layered her harmonies beneath his, her voice weaving around his in a delicate, heartbreaking dance. Then, unexpectedly, Snoop stepped to a microphone in the corner of the room. He didn't rap. He spoke. In his iconic, smooth cadence, he delivered a quiet, poetic verse. A reflection on resilience, on seeing the sun after a long night, on the strength it takes to wear your scars with pride. It was the voice of the elder, the survivor, the observer, giving context and wisdom to the raw emotion of the younger singers. It was the final, perfect piece of the puzzle. When the engineer played the full track back for the first time, no one in the control room spoke. The song filled the space, "Atseitsi," polished, powerful anthem of survival that had lost none of its original raw honesty. It was Leo's pain, Billie's empathy, and Snoop's wisdom, all woven together into a single breathtaking tapestry of sound. Leo looked at the two global superstars who had treated him and his song with such profound respect and care. Tears welled in his eyes, but for the first time, they weren't tears of sadness or release. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude. He had walked into the studio feeling like an imposter, a kid who had gotten lucky. He was leaving feeling like an artist. Billie wrapped him in a gentle hug. "Thank you for trusting us with this," she whispered. Snoop placed a fatherly hand on his shoulder. "You did good, nephew," he said, his voice full of warmth. "You told your story. Now, the world's gonna listen." They had taken his solitary echo and transformed it into a chorus that felt both intimately personal and universally resonant. The final track was titled Faded Scars, feat. Snoop Dogg and Billie Eilish. As they listened one last time, Leo thought about the journey from his lonely apartment to this temple of sound. He had sent out a digital prayer, a desperate shot in the dark, hoping for a nod from his hero. He had received a symphony in return. The experience had changed him. The weight he had carried alone for so long was now shared. He had found a tribe in the most unlikely of places, a family forged in the fires of creativity and mutual respect. The song was ready. The world was about to hear not just his story, but the story of what can happen when people choose to listen. They decided to release the song and its accompanying in-studio video with no advance promotion. No press releases, no interviews, no hype. Just a coordinated post from all three of their social media accounts at the same time. They would let the song speak for itself, trusting in its power to connect, just as it had connected the three of them in this sacred space. At 9 a.m. Pacific Time on a Tuesday, the song dropped. 3 simultaneous posts from Leo, Billie Eilish, and Snoop Dogg, each with a simple caption, "For anyone who has ever fought a battle." Faded Scars. The in-studio video, shot in black and white, captured the raw emotion of the recording session. Leo's earnestness, Billie's empathy, Snoop's quiet wisdom. It was simple, intimate, and devastatingly powerful. The internet didn't just react. It detonated. The song shot to the top of every streaming chart in the world within the first hour. The hashtag, Faded Scars, became the #1 trending topic globally. But it was more than just a trend. It was a deluge of shared human experience. People weren't just tweeting that they liked the song. They were sharing their own stories. The video's comments section became a global support group. A soldier in Afghanistan wrote about his battle with PTSD. A teacher from Japan shared her story of losing her husband to cancer. A teenager in Brazil talked about their struggle with depression. Millions of people, separated by geography and culture, were united in a moment of collective catharsis, all prompted by one song. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Tough-looking men who filmed themselves listening to rap were shown with tears streaming down their faces. Music critics, known for their cynical analysis, were left speechless, simply nodding along with glistening eyes. Nurses played the song in hospital wards for their patients. It became an instant anthem for fighters, survivors, and anyone carrying a private sorrow. Makes Millions Cry wasn't just a headline. It was a literal description of the song's impact. Leo watched it all from the same small Long Beach apartment where the journey began. He and Maya sat side by side, scrolling through the endless wave of messages, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Every comment, every share, was a confirmation that his pain had not been in vain. His lonely song had become a beacon, his private scars a source of public strength. The money started pouring in, life-altering amounts that he couldn't comprehend. But almost immediately, he knew what he had to do. In consultation with Snoop and Billie, who both enthusiastically agreed, they announced that a majority of the proceeds from the song would be used to establish the Faded Scars Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing mental health support and music therapy for young cancer patients and survivors. His story became a global news phenomenon. He was interviewed by major networks, not as a celebrity, but as an advocate. He spoke with a quiet confidence that he never knew he possessed, his voice no longer trembling. He was no longer just Leo the cancer survivor. He was Leo, the artist and activist, who had turned his deepest trauma into a global force for good. The culmination of his journey came a few months later at the Grammy Awards. Faded Scars was nominated for Song of the Year. The three of them, the unlikely trio, performed it live. On that global stage, under the bright lights, Leo looked out at the audience filled with the world's biggest music stars. He wasn't scared anymore. He belonged. He started the song alone, just him and his scarred acoustic guitar. Then Billie's haunting harmony joined him, a pillar of support. Finally, Snoop walked out, not to the center stage, but stood slightly behind them, a guardian figure, and delivered his poignant verse. In that moment, they weren't just performers, they were storytellers, sharing a testimony of human resilience. As the final note of the song hung in the air, the entire auditorium rose to its feet in a thunderous, emotional standing ovation. The cameras captured legends of the industry with tears in their eyes. Leo looked over at Billie, who was squeezing his hand, and at Snoop, who gave him a proud, fatherly nod. He had done it. He had taken the echo in his room and made it shake the world. His life was forever changed, but he remained grounded in the truth that had started it all. The fame, the awards, the money, they were all secondary to the song's true purpose. It was, and always would be, a lifeline. A simple, honest melody that reminded him, and now millions of others, that even after the deepest wounds, our scars can fade, and we can learn to sing again. Leo's story shows us that your voice matters, no matter how quiet it starts. We want to hear your story. What battle have you fought, and what song helped you through it? Leave a comment below, because every story deserves to be heard. And, if you haven't already, please subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching.